With Avengers Endgame out in theaters, Marvel Cinematic Universe now has 22 films. It is time to sit here and rank these movies from worst to best. Let's get started. Hey everybody, my name is Justin. I love to watch movies. If you guys love to watch movies too, you guys are in the right spot. Consider hitting that subscribe button down below. Today we're going to be talking about all 22 of Marvel Cinematic Universe films and rank them from worst to best. But before we do get started, I need you guys to comment down below with how you would rank all 22 of these films from Iron Man to Avengers Endgame. This film will contain spoilers on Endgame, so if you have not seen Endgame, I would skip this video. But if you have seen Endgame, let's talk about all 22 of these films. So let's get started with this list. Coming at number 22, the worst film of them all, Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 for me is easily the worst of this list. Now there is some really cool action. I do think that Robert Downey Jr. does a good job as Iron Man once again. I don't have a problem with the character. I actually enjoy some of the character growth in this movie. He seems more emotional in this movie. I have an issue with some of the route for the villains, and some of the action does feel a little bit repetitive. It's cool to watch, but I feel like some of the scenes I've felt like I've seen before in Iron Man and Iron Man 2. But the choice to change the villain from the Mandarin to the other guy, it's something that's completely different, and I'm not sure if I was on board with that because I was really invested in the Mandarin. And they did a switch up and it just was completely unnecessary. Coming at number 21 is Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 for me is not a great film. It lacks depth to the character. It's just really corny at times. The Whiplash is not a very interesting villain. And Tony Stark is just very silly in this movie. He's drunk and he has these parties and he's just crazy and he's out there. But we do get the introduction of Black Widow. I think she worked really well in this movie. There's a little more of Nick Fury. You can tell they were trying to set up something more within this movie, but at its core, it lacked some interesting moments. It's not very memorable. I've seen it a few times, and every time I see it, it's just not a movie that I enjoy. Coming at number 20 is Thor. Thor, for me, was a character I was eager to see. Chris Hemsworth is a really good actor, and I was curious to see how he would handle the character of Thor. Now, when Thor is on Asgard, his home world, with his brother Loki and his father Odin and his mother, I really enjoy those scenes. I think there's a lot of great world building within those moments, but he unfortunately spends a lot of time on Earth with Jane and her friends, and I don't think those moments are as strong as the ones on Asgard, and unfortunately there's a lot of moments on Earth. Now, there's a couple funny scenes where he's like a fish out of water, but when it comes down to it, a lot of those scenes are repetitive, and there's a lot of them, and I want to see more of Asgard. Coming at number 19 is The Incredible Hulk. This is the one that stars Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, and I think he did a pretty good job as Bruce Banner. But my issue with this movie is that there's not a lot of conflict between the Hulk and Bruce Banner. I want to see a conflict within themselves, trying to understand each other. But this movie does have a really good villain of the Abomination. I think some of the action is filmed really well. It's gritty, it's dark. It feels different compared to other Marvel films where they're now kind of like bright and upbeat and have a really fun soundtrack. Where The Incredible Hulk is very different compared to the other Marvel films. So when people think of the MCU, they don't initially go to The Incredible Hulk, and they often forget that it is one of their movies, because at times it is forgettable, but I do think that the action's filmed very well. I would like to see a little more of the conflict between Bruce Banner and the Hulk. Coming in number 18 is Thor 2. Now, Thor 2 is a step up from Thor, but it's still not as strong. It has a lot of the issues from the first movie carried over into the second movie. A lot more Loki, which I did enjoy. The villain is forgettable, but I do like some of the action in here, and it's filmed differently than the first Thor movie. I like seeing the brother relationship between Loki and Thor. It's what I wanted to see a lot in the first film, and we do get it in the second film. I feel like Loki is stronger in this movie, and fans love Loki, and this is why we love him so much, is feel like Thor the Dark World really gave us what fans love about Loki is in this movie. But it still lacked heart and some really good action scenes. I wanted more out of this movie, and unfortunately I did not get what I wanted. Coming at number 17 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The characters are good in here. The action's fun. It's still really upbeat and colorful and vibrant. I really enjoy it. But it's a movie that just seems smaller for the Guardians. I mean, you know, the big scope of things, it just seems like more of a personal movie for the Guardians. And I didn't mind that so much, but all the characters are doing something different, and they don't feel connected as a group in this movie. We have this really weird side plots with these gold people, and it never really comes into play within this movie. We have Star-Lord with his father, and Gamora and Nebula is in here, and Mantis. There's just so many different things going on, and I don't think one certain storyline is strong in this movie. I feel like each little one is okay at times, but once they all get together, I just don't feel connected as I did much with the first movie. The characters are still funny, they're interesting to watch, but as a whole, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 just didn't feel as strong as the first time, and I want to see them more as a group in this movie. Coming number 16 is Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is an okay movie. It's one of their most beautiful looking films. A lot of the magical moments really do shine in here, but it takes a lot to get Doctor Strange to be a very interesting character. He reminds me a lot of Tony Stark in the beginning of the movie. Really cocky guy, but as he gets to understand his powers, he kind of calms down and becomes more about that superhero life. I do gotta say though, I am really looking forward to seeing Doctor Strange 2, because as he understands his powers, he's someone different from when he had no powers, and I really liked his performance in Endgame and Infinity War, and I can't wait to see what he does in the future. Coming at number 15 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Ant-Man is a really cool character, and I really enjoyed the Wasp in the first Ant-Man movie, so they work really well together, utilizing a lot of fast-paced action scenes to their advantage, and utilizing small objects to become big weapons is really fun to watch. You got that scene with a little Pez dispenser, the Hello Kitty one, and then it becomes really large. A lot of those scenes are a lot of fun, and the villain in here, Ghost, is a compelling villain. You actually root for her. She has an agenda that's not really villainous per se. She wants to protect herself. So it's a different route for the villain, which I did appreciate. The movie's still a lot of fun. The action scenes are upbeat. Paul Rudd is great as Scott Lang. And I do like Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp. And I really was surprised with this movie. Coming number 14 is Iron Man, the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This one started it all, and I do think that Robert Downey Jr. gave a really good performance as Tony Stark. I like seeing the progression of this character as someone who was very powerful and then kind of lost it all, and then he had to come back, and he understood the power of his suits that he was creating. So I like the progression of the characters. The villain is a weak point in this movie. I don't feel like Jeff Bridges' character was used very well in this movie. At times it does feel like a very typical superhero movie. This movie doesn't really stand out as other superhero movies do now. I think it stuck to a certain structure, and it didn't want to veer off from that route. It wanted to stay it safe, and I understand with, you know, trying to start this universe, you want to kind of play it safe. But as a today's standpoint, films are a little bit different, and I do think that Iron Man works for what it is. And the character of Tony Stark is very hilarious, fun to watch, and I love Iron Man. Coming in at number 13 is the first Ant-Man movie. Paul Rudd, great as Scott Lang, really fun movie, enjoyable. A lot of the side characters, like Michael Pena, are fun to watch as well. Villain, weak side, but overall a really fun movie. Coming at number 12 is Avengers Age of Ultron. This is an okay movie. I think that the different visions, the dreams that these characters were having felt out of place in this movie and really took away from the overall story that they were trying to tell. Ultron is a very sinister villain. I like the introduction of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. As a group, a lot of the action scenes do work, but it does feel a bit disconnected at times. but when you get them all assembled together, it's still a lot of fun. Coming in at number 11 is Black Panther. Black Panther is a really interesting character to watch. Wakanda is one of the coolest places in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of the action scenes are cool. This has a really amazing villain, Killmonger, one that you want to side with, one that you understood, and he played very well against Black Panther. Black Panther is a character I wanted to watch over and over again. It was a very successful movie, and I can't wait to see what they do for a second film. Coming number 10 is Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel was a very personable character, very enjoyable. I really liked her character. She really understood her powers when she came into them. She was not afraid to go into the fight. Reminded me a lot of Captain America. Another interesting villain in here, the de-aging of Samuel Jackson, I thought worked really well. Captain Marvel and Nick Fury's relationship was one of the high points in this movie. Goose was a very fun, cute character as well. And I wanted to know more about her life, and I was curious to see what she would do in Endgame, and I think she did a pretty good job. Coming at number 9 is Spider-Man Homecoming. I was really excited to see Spider-Man Homecoming because I love the character of Peter Parker, and I think they handled the character really well, having him be equal parts interested in being a superhero as well as being a high school student. So they played both of those parts really well. We understand that Peter Parker is a high school student. He's young. He has to learn a lot about himself and what it takes to become a superhero. And he's struggling with those moments, and Tony Stark is trying to teach him what it means to be a superhero as well as a young teenager. So him struggling with those moments were some of the high points in this movie. And the villain of Michael Keaton as the Vulture, they really nailed those scenes. I think he's one of my favorite villains in the MCU. So overall, Spider-Man Homecoming was a lot of fun. It was funny. Action scenes were filmed really well, and I like the struggle that Peter Parker was dealing with of being a student as well as a superhero. Coming in number 8 is Guardians of the Galaxy. This was a gamble for Marvel, but it worked out really well in their favor because you took all these characters that not a lot of people knew, and they didn't work well as a group for half of the movie. But when it came to the part that they understood each other, you were totally on board with it. All these different characters, Drax and Gamora and Rocket and Groot, you really like them. They're funny, they're personable, they're interesting. You want to see them working as a group. I think the journey of them understanding each other was the fun part in this movie because each one individually was really strong, and you knew that if they worked together as a group, it'd be really, really fun to watch. Coming in at number 7 is Thor Ragnarok. This was the movie that I needed from Thor. This was a hilarious movie that Thor just felt really confident in, and you had the Hulk in here, and it was just all around just a blast of a movie. Korg is a really interesting, fun character. They had so many side characters that were hilarious. The movie just knew what it wanted to be. It wanted to be something fun and upbeat, while also understanding the character of Thor and his point in his career. They needed to change the character a little bit, and they gave him something to struggle with. And I loved watching Thor in this movie. I loved the fight sequences and how this movie is going to transition into something different for Thor and Asgard. It's just overall a blast of a movie. Coming in at number 6 is Captain America Winter Soldier. This is something completely different than Marvel has done before, and really in general with superhero movies. It's more of a political thriller and dealing with the effects of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, learning how to live in current time because he's been frozen for God knows how long, like 70 years. It's crazy how long he was frozen, but it's interesting to see how he can adapt to this new world. And the introduction of Falcon, they worked really well together, and we had Bucky, and here's the Winter Soldier. Those moments are really emotional because you know that in there, deep down inside, there's some good moments of the Winter Soldier, and he's just being corrupted and mind controlled. So you want the relationship to work out. You want them to understand each other and be friends again. And Captain America doesn't give up on his friend. And this movie just solidified why I really like Captain America. Is he doesn't give up on his friends, and he wants to see the best in everybody. So he was struggling with that. I thought it was some good writing for the character. And they mix it well with like a deep political thriller, some really intense moments as well, and Winter Soldier is just amazing. Coming in number 5 is Captain America, the First Avenger. Now I know this movie sits really low on people's list, and I understand why. At times it's really corny and silly with him trying to dance and sing and whatever, but I like the way this movie is filmed. It feels very vintage in its time. I think they understood the time parts very well, and I really like the character of Steve Rogers. Him really skinny, doesn't have any powers, but wants to fight, wants to help his country in some way, and he becomes Captain America. And that progression of him getting strong, his personality is still there. He still wants to get into the fight. He still wants to help out. And I think that is truly amazing to see a character like this that's so willing to help out. And I think that they continue that throughout the rest of the movies. And Red Skull is a pretty cool character. I like the suits in here. I just like how this movie feels. And I always enjoy watching Captain America, the First Avenger. Coming at number 4 is Avengers, the first Avengers movie. This is a really cinematic movie. I remember seeing this at the midnight screening and just being so hyped because they were building this movie up for many years. You had Iron Man, Iron Man 2, the Hulk movie, Thor, and Captain America. And then we also get in Black Widow in there, as well as Hawkeye. So there's so many cool things to love about this movie. And I think that they did a good job bringing Loki into the movie, having this movie feel urgent, while also being a lot of fun, and them trying to work well as a team, because they didn't know some of them, and some of them seemed like a threat to Earth, especially Thor. And so they had to understand each other, and at times it was hard for them to work as a group, but when it came down to it, they really understood each other, and it's a blast. Coming in number 3 is Captain America Civil War. This is something that I never thought would happen in the MCU films, and I didn't want it to happen, but it did. And we had a film where Captain America was fighting Iron Man. You would think that since they worked really well in the first Avengers movie and Age of Ultron, that they wouldn't fight. But I think that the MCU needed to change at this point. It was feeling a little bit repetitive at times, but they wanted to change their storyline. They weren't afraid to take risks, and it paid off. This was a really emotional movie with some really intense action scenes. And some of the best Marvel moments ever is when Iron Man is fighting Captain America. Because you don't want them to fight, you want them to just talk it out and be friends, but it's not going to happen like that. And so they had to work as a team, and then they fell apart. You also had Black Panther in here, really great introduction. Spider-Man, really fun as well. And then you had Giant Man with Paul Rudd in here. So Civil War was a movie that I wasn't expecting, and I think that it worked out. It's a movie that I still really like to watch, and it's a movie that's heavy on story with some really good action scenes. Now the next two, Infinity War and Endgame. This one I was thinking a lot about. I feel like at any time it could really switch because both are really good. But as of right now, coming at number 2 is Avengers Infinity War. Infinity War is much more of a villain movie. Really strong villain by Thanos, and this movie feels urgent. It's quickly paced, but it's 2 hours and 21 minutes. I don't know. I think it is. But I watched it 7 times in the month of April. Infinity War is a movie that just feels really intense, really urgent, and it's interesting. It's interesting to see some of these characters that never seen each other before play out, work together as a team, like Doctor Strange and Iron Man. And then you had Thor with the Guardians. Now they're together in this movie, and the relationships work really well. This movie boasts some of the best action scenes, especially Thor and Wakanda. I love Thanos as a villain, probably one of my favorite movie villains of all time. But it's a movie that I could sit down and watch over and over and over again. Obviously I did, and I still really enjoy it. But coming at number 1 is Avengers Endgame. Like I said, Infinity War is much more of a villain movie. Endgame is much more of a team movie, a much more of an emotional movie. The end sequence with everybody coming into play is, I had chills in some of the best scenes I've ever seen. When Steve Rogers got the hammer from Thor, epic. The death of Iron Man, truly emotional. Iron Man, Captain America retiring, really well played out. This movie took risks. I wasn't expecting certain scenes to play out like they did. I think the time heist moments were a lot of fun. Some characters were stronger than they ever been in this movie. This movie's way more emotional than Infinity War. It's not as funny, and it's not as quickly paced, but Endgame gave me everything I wanted in a movie. Great character development, great action, a lot of emotional moments. It's funny at times. The relationships work. It's very cinematic. And a movie that's been building up for 11 years, this is the movie that you get, and it works out. I would be so disappointed if the movie was bad. After 11 years of build-up, they gave us something terrible. But this movie is exactly what I wanted from a movie just like this that's been building up for so many years. It's fun, it's emotional, it's a great time. It does not feel like 3 hours. It still feels very urgent. It's an adventure film, it's a team movie, it's an action film, whatever it may be, it's truly epic. So there you guys have it, all 22 Marvel films ranked from worst to best. How would you rank these movies? Make sure to let me know down below. You guys can check out my review for Avengers Endgame right over here, more in depth about what I thought about that movie. My name is JustinWatchesMovies, and you guys stay classy, YouTube.